Okay. So before we start, I should probably say this up front. Resident Evil Requiem is one of the strangest Resident Evil games I've played in a while, and not because of the monsters or anything like that. It's strange because the entire time I was playing it, I felt like I was playing two different Resident Evil games that occasionally ran into each other in the hallway. And I don't mean like that in some sort of dramatic review sense, I meant literally. One half of this game feels like it walks straight out of Resident Evil 7 with the tight corridors, limited resources, claustrophobic environments, moments where you're staring at a locked door wondering if it's opening or actually a mistake. The other half? Resident Evil 4 and its big badass glory shows up, kicks the door open, loads 6 weapons and starts solving the problem with extreme confidence. And somehow both of those things exist inside the same game. Now, before we go any further, I should also mention I did a quick impression video earlier when the first gameplay started showing up within the first hour, and at the time I had some concerns about the visual jump and the character direction and the split gameplay between Grace and Leon. After actually playing the game, some of those concerns changed a little. Some of them didn't change at all. But the overall result lands somewhere in the middle. I don't hate Resident Evil Requiem. There's a lot to say in here that actually works really well. Grace's sections can legitimately be tense in ways that reminded me of why Resident Evil 7 was such a strong reset for the series. But at the same time, the game keeps shifting gears in ways that feel like Capcom walked into a room, looked at the entire history of Resident Evil and said, let's just use all of it. And on paper, it sounds like a celebration of the franchise, and more times than not, even I would be a sucker for such things. But in practice, it sometimes feels like the systems, mechanics, and ideas for multiple Resident Evil eras got kind of pushed together into one space and then told to behave. Sometimes that can work, don't get me wrong, it's happened before in the past. But sometimes it can feel like the game itself isn't even sure which identity it wants to lean into. Which brings us to our biggest structural thing in this game. Grace and Leon are not just two playable characters, they're basically two different Resident Evil philosophies. Grace carries this slower, suffocating horror side. The game gets tighter when she's on the screen, resources matter more, the environments start doing most of the work and creating tension. Leon walks in and you suddenly remember why Resident Evil 4 changed the entire genre. He's capable, he's equipped, and when he enters a room, the fear level drops because now you're not surviving the situation, you're solving it. Both playstyles are good. The question is whether they belong in the same game the way this one presents them. So what I want to do in this review is break down Resident Evil Requiem piece by piece. Because this game sits in a very specific place in the Resident Evil history books. It's not quite slow and dreadful like 7, but it's not quite the confident action movie that is Part 4. Resident Evil Requiem lives right in the middle. Sometimes the middle ground works, and then sometimes it feels like two games are trying to share the same body. I think that's where I'm going to start. Okay, so our story actually begins in the FBI Midwest field office. Okay. Alan Wake much? Alright, so anyway. So the director of the FBI has to approach Grace Ashcroft, the only girl seemingly for the job, in which she's supposed to visit a mysterious hotel and look into the goings-on of a new strain of virus. It's apparently unidentified and no one's ever seen anything like it. Considering you're in a world of Resident Evil, I'd figure everybody has seen everything. This is kind of like when the Avengers had aliens attack and every subsequent movie and show afterwards tried to pretend there was no alien attack and everything still seemed weird. It's like that. In any case, they also mentioned the fact that her mother actually was killed in the same building she's going to be investigating, which is kind of weird to set up for an FBI agent to go and start exploring, even though it's obvious he sympathizes with the fact that she's faced trauma over this incident. But I digress. Grace then finds herself later going towards the Renwood Hotel. Jesus Christ, calm down with the text. Anyway, I took a moment to get a kind of feel for the scenery and atmosphere, the overall graphics and things like that. It's very, very beautiful background settings. You can see a lot of details in the signage and things like that. They obviously took some time to kind of update everything going on when it comes to the overall looks. So I definitely appreciate that. In any case, she happens across a police officer that's guarding the area that's supposed to be under investigation, to which he lets her in and kind of says, "Good luck, bro," and sends her on her way. You then spend the remaining amount of time walking through an alleyway to get to said building, in which you walk into the Wrenwood Hotel through the employee entrance. After a round of heavy breathing and some serious investigative work, she takes a look around the hotel in the area that is allowed to her anyway because a door is locked, and realizes there's a photo in the bar, and the photo is of her. Behind that photo is a key that takes her into the next room, allowing her to get past all this pesky crime scene stuff. Grace wanders into a room in which a bed is completely covered in photos of her, which freaks her out a little bit, as you can see by the way she's heavily breathing pretty much 99% of this game. This seems to trigger some sort of flashback in which she is a kid and her mother is telling her that she needs to get off the computer, go to bed, all that good stuff, and she receives a call. The call is a person checking to see if Miss Ashcroft is there. Once she confirms that she is in fact in that house as they speak, the phone clicks, and all of a sudden the house is under attack. Under attack by what? We don't know, but the mother is hesitant at first and then breaks into action as she realizes it's time to get her daughter the hell out of there. You proceed to follow your mother on a Disney's Haunted Mansion ride trip as you coast through the hotel itself, making it all the way to a noise in which it turns out to be the manager, who says, "We'll get everything repaired in a second." And then he doesn't, ever again, as the bad guy from Blade 2 appears and absolutely offs him, and the mother does nothing more than dispatch the enemy with extreme prejudice. But before leaving, she manages to stash something behind a giant picture frame. Grace and Mom make it up to the top of the building, in which they have nowhere really to go. Grace is freaking the hell out, and the mom tries to console her the best way she can, when out of nowhere she is also stabbed and taken out of the game. The assailant, for lack of a better term, notices that it's Grace and says, "I found you," before falling to his death as well, knocking over a lantern in the process. The entire hotel goes up in a blaze, and she's trapped there screaming, "Why, God, why?" to the Lord with her fist raised high, as her mother's now dead and the whole building's burning down. And then it cuts back to present day. See? Present day. It just said present day. You with me so far? Grace travels back towards the painting, to which she pulls out the hidden envelope that her mother had left. Inside is a journal entry, 3 journal entries in particular, that simply state that "I feel like I'm being followed by a guy in a hood." Obviously that was true. And then there's also a disc inside there as well, to which goes into some sort of system. Definitely not anything modernized in today's technological standards, but here we are. After doing so and finding out the contents of the package, she then notices the police officer that let her in initially, and he looks like he's a little bit under the weather. And by under the weather, I mean a zombie, as he transforms right in front of her face, bites her, and probably one of the most awkward QTE events begin as you're trying to dodge the barrel of a shotgun being aimed at you, while the man is currently being consumed by an advanced form of what can only be described as a T-virus, or probably that virus from 28 days later. Either way, it's bad news. You dodge it for a bit, and you finally get away from him after impaling him with a poker from the fireplace. A chase ensues as you make it upstairs all the way to the end of a hallway, revealing a simple window. You use that window as an escape hatch for the police officer, tossing him out the window. Upon doing so, you then notice noises coming from a room. You stumble in, and Grace realizes there's a man simply sitting there with a helmet made entirely of 1,000 different goggles attached to it. The man explains that she is the chosen one, and because she's the chosen one, he had to place the bodies here and lure her to this site, seemingly to the investigation. Here is my burning question before we continue, and it feels like kind of a plot hole. They mean to tell me that Grace was assigned to this investigation, despite having a personal tie to the locale, despite obviously being distressed and traumatized over the incident itself. I mean, her mother did get murdered in front of her, and apparently everyone knows it. But now, after a body gets mysteriously placed in this locale, they simply go, "You know who would be good here? It's Grace." This chief is either a undercover bad guy, or this coincidence is so ridiculous that I refuse to believe it and feel insulted you would imply I would believe it. I don't know. That's just me. But we're going to move on because it's Resident Evil and none of this ever makes sense in the end fully. We did just get done punching boulders. Hell, I think Under the Mayo said it best.
LOL, Resident Evil Requiem actively damages the franchise characters. Wesker came back from the dead and started teleporting 25 years ago. Then Leon started backflipping through laser walls. Nothing has mattered since then.
I mean, where's the lie? In any case, despite the fact that not much of Resident Evil will ever be coherent or cohesive, here we are. So anyway, he explains that she's the chosen one, or some such. And then, before she has time to put up a fight, he knocks her out cold and tells her to go to sleep. A few minutes prior to this on the L Bridge, Leon Kennedy is now walking through a crime scene, discovering that the bodies that have been found dead do in fact have black markings on them. He's talking to Sherry Birkin on the phone, who delivers him a little bit of intel as a person of interest has just arrived. Now, this gentleman goes by the name of Victor Gideon, and he's a former T-virus researcher. Leon's only lead or clue to find out where he may be results in a tip being given to him by Sherry about a missing police officer. Now, if this were a few minutes ago before the events of her being choked out, symbolizing that this in fact is happening in tandem timelines with everything that happened with Grace a second ago, how in the hell did they put a missing persons case out for this police officer that quickly? Whatever, I'm letting it go. Leon speeds off to where Grace had done her introductory tutorial on the game, only to find that Victor Gideon now has Grace over his shoulder and he's walking down the street like there's not a single problem wrong. Leon locks eyes with the man, and the moment he does, Victor decides to walk away, but not before firing tranquilizer darts into random folks, infecting them with a super version of the T-virus. The moment that happens, we get into the action Leon style as he has to chase after Victor Gideon, all the while dodging explosions, car wrecks, everything and in between, as we're now in the action phase of Resident Evil Requiem. And as quickly as it started, it's over, as you lose Victor in the chaos and simply have to accept defeat. If it weren't for the fact that Sherry realized that Victor had purchased a property in the area, you would have been lost in this case, so thank God for that. Also, it should be noted that Leon is also infected with the same virus that is apparently affecting so many other people that are survivors from Raccoon City. Food for thought. Anyway, back to Grace. Grace wakes up from being put to sleep as she's suspended upside down and having her blood extracted from her arm via IV. After escaping, she's able to walk down the corridors to find she's in some sort of clinic-like facility. And as she goes room to room, checking for objects and items, she stumbles across a storybook that tells of a woman in the dark who seemingly does better in the dark than she does in the light as the light sends her away. How very ominous. And on cue, going into the closet of a child's bedroom, you see exactly what they're talking about. After various opportunities to go and find the fuse to open the door to escape this wretched thing, Grace finally makes her way to the actual gate. Before Grace has time to fully escape, however, she's grabbed by the girl and taken right back where she started and tossed around like a rag doll. Who knows what's going to happen next? Certainly not I, and certainly not the player at this point in time, because it quickly flashes over to Leon, who pulls in his stylish sports car. He's tracked Gideon all the way to this building. He walks in promptly and is met by some sort of nurse who's explained that he's been expected. Please wait in the lobby and all will be well and explained to him. It's a little weird, considering the fact that they were just chasing each other and Gideon was shooting people with zombie darts like 2 seconds ago. But he is Leon, so he decides to wait in the lobby after all, and then he can have his sit-down meeting with Gideon, and maybe they could hash things out and discuss why things are the way they are. This meeting, of course, doesn't happen because by the time he gets real comfortable in that waiting room, an alert goes off explaining that there's some sort of escape and a number of different subjects have gone rampant. The nurse tries to come and get him and collect him up, maybe get him to an escape area, something like that, something for a safety zone, and she's killed. They move on to Leon, who decides it's best to just go ahead and do what Leon does best and fight through the hordes and hordes in order to get out of there. Parallel scenes start to merge when Leon makes it far enough into the building that he sees Grace crawling through the gate, only to be yanked back by some giant monster girl thing. He quickly dispatches the girl thing with his Big Daddy Magnum and asks Grace what her name is. They get the introductions out of the way, all before the gates close in between the two, causing a split, kind of like a Scooby-Doo scenario, really. Leon gives the Magnum over to Grace and says, "Be careful, watch yourself," so on and so forth, while Leon has to stay and face Gideon himself. Gideon does his signature trademark sleeper hold and puts Leon out of business. Because you can only get so much of Leon before they want to take it away from you, we switch back to Grace, who is now charged with escaping the care center safely. She makes it to an office in which there's a hidden little bunker holding 2 different holding cells. Inside one of the holding cells is a little girl. She notices the little girl has cataracts in her eyes and cannot see anything. However, it also should be noted that the holding cell next to her is also locked away and sealed. However, whatever was in there has tunneled through a wall and has obviously made it out. A dying man outside the cells yells for her to stay away from that girl before dying immediately. And then she receives a keycard that allows her certain access to certain parts of the building. However, it does not grant her access to the little girl who's trapped in the holding cell. So she leaves her there for now and continues on her merry adventure. Things get a little interesting from here as she makes it to the kitchen and finds that the chef, who is bigger than a brick shithouse, has been infected as well. Rather than the simple signs of infection, he is mumbling slurred out speech patterns and quotes that only a chef would say. He seems to be in a holding pattern in which he's reenacting the chef's movements, trying to cut meat, walking to different parts of the kitchen, making instructions, different things like that. So your best interest is to be stealthy and not get caught by this freight train, or you will absolutely be handled. She does, and makes it into a hallway in which you start to see the full effects of how infected can actually have residual memories of the past lives they've had. Now, this isn't like the regular T virus. This is something special. This is the super T virus tyrant, whatever. You watch them as they have certain mannerisms and patterns that they seem to be on loop and repeat, whether it's zombies that are afraid of lighting, or it's a zombie who's forced to clean up the area because she was a maid before she was infected. It doesn't matter. They're all trapped in this same holding pattern that doesn't seem to end for them. Very, very sad stuff. I like that personally. It was a good way to show zombies. Making them talk adds a bit of hollowness to them. And all you're wondering, looking for random pieces to open a door as Resident Evil games go, you stumble across Gideon, who's in an office. He explains that your destiny is intertwined with theirs, so on and so forth, but you're there to open or activate something called Elpis. Grace has zero interest in becoming part of destinies or anything like that, as she's too busy mouth breathing and running in fear, so she takes off. She manages to elude Gideon, and Gideon walks into a separate area completely, allowing her time to escape. She has to figure out one more puzzle in which she has to press a sequence of buttons. However, it should be noted that these buttons are in Braille, so she needs someone who can read Braille in order to discover this puzzle and unlock the final piece to get through the door. Well, that's convenient and works out. So Grace goes and finds Emily once more and explains that now that she has the means to get her out of the holding cell, she asks if she can take her to a puzzle that she can read some Braille to her. Emily begrudgingly says okay, not really knowing if she can trust a random stranger who just appeared out of nowhere and she can't see. But she agrees to it, and you begin this mini-game quest of dragging along a little girl on your back as you're making through hordes of zombies and things like that. Once you make it to the actual puzzle itself, you leave Emily there, and Grace has to deal with zombies that fill the area in the meantime. Once she actually obtains the piece, everyone rejoices for a split second before our old friend returns the girl and grabs Emily and takes her underground. Emily also takes the last and final puzzle piece needed to open the door with her. So Grace, having to save the girl and get the puzzle piece, dives into the hole to follow after. Taking a break from tactical stealth horror, we go back to Leon, who's come to now, and he's in the face of Gideon. Gideon tries to have a moment with him, maybe a powwow, a parlay, try to have the two kind of hash it out, settle their differences because it's futile to fight it. But no, he did not get the memo. Leon's in this game, therefore all he's going to do is kick flips and action missiles. That's what he's about, and that's what's going to happen. So he quickly lays a few quips down as Gideon tries to tell him that maybe we should just talk and have a conversation, and it doesn't go very well. Leon then escapes to find that he has to walk through the same place that Grace had been walking through for the last hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on what you're doing for exploration. The only difference is it's Leon walking through. So everything you ran from before, stayed stealthy about before, you're running through like a bull in a china shop. You simply just start kicking things in the teeth, using your axe to chop people up, and quite possibly using the craziest backpack size I've ever seen in my life. Leon makes it to Gideon's office after fighting through hordes and hordes of zombies that Grace could not, and is quickly treated to computer exposition as he and Sherry now confirm they both have a new version of the T-virus. They also stumble across the word Elpis with a lot of redacted material. Leon has the same questions we do as Grace's photo appears as well. So now Leon is asking, what does Grace have to do with Elpis? We are asking what Grace has to do with Elpis. Grace is asking what she has to do with Elpis. And then we take a break from all the violence that we just did for about 15 minutes and move right back towards Grace. People have their comments about the longest parts of the game and stuff they wish they could skip later on, but this by far is the slowest part for me. This entire sewer system plotline. Longest story short is little Emily is trapped in a jail cell and held captive there by the girl. Your goal is to find 3 generator pieces or fuses to turn on all of the power in the building. Now you can power the elevator and get the hell out of Dodge. Longest story short, you do eventually. Shout out to the initial knee-jerk reaction you have when the girl actually climbs on top of the elevator, and when she pokes her head through the top, you can't help but shoot at her. They add a damaging animation as if you're damaging her, and she even recoils, but after a certain amount of time, she will absolutely kill you because you didn't go and simply push something out of the way of the door. I saw a few people on Twitter that didn't do that as well, and a few people had a good chuckle on it. I was one of those people that absolutely opened fire the first time and then got my head eaten off. So, there's that. Anyway, you get a quick little scare as you think your leg might be cut off in the process of getting rid of the girl one more time, but that turns out not to be true. You console Emily, and you both take off towards the door, now having all the pieces needed to get through the final door leading to the exit. Once you make it outside, you quickly see a helicopter landing pad with a helicopter right there and a pilot inside. Life couldn't get any easier, except for the fact that the man's a coward, and he explains that his key was taken by his boss and he went inside that building just outside of the helicopter. He would do the girl a favor and would watch Emily while she goes in there to retrieve the key. A few things wrong here, like number 1, after going through all the trouble to try to get this girl into some form of safety, she then leaves him in the hands of a stranger who she cannot see. This seems like a good idea. Plus, half the people here are Umbrella employees, so why in God's green earth would you decide to leave that girl with that man? How do you know that man does not know that girl? I would much rather have her just said, no, I'll carry her on my back, thanks, weirdo, and then call it a night and wait to get the key so they can fly out to safety together. But I digress. You go in and decide it's best to explore the area. Come to find out, it's actually a hatch that takes you down to lower levels. Great. So you take those lower levels and you go down and explore, and you see that it's a whole nother lab. There are a bunch of experiments everywhere, and there's just a bit of turmoil everywhere you look. She goes and searches for the key and does indeed find it. And on your way out, you catch Gideon on a cell phone talking to whoever, explaining that he's done everything he needed to do in this lab, and now it's time to self-destruct the bitch. And that's what he indeed does. So you're a race against time as numerous zombies get unleashed, as well as the fact that the place is flooding. Everything's going wrong and you got to get out of there, which you do. Not before going through some panic-inducing moments where you either have to decide if you're fighting or just running. I chose run personally because, yeah, she's not really proficient in anything except screaming and breathing hard. Grace makes it back to the helicopter along with some friends that she seemed to have brought from the actual base themselves. And as she gets into the helicopter, a number of different other zombies are leaping on top of it. The helicopter is able to take off. However, it should be noted that the only reason it did not continue on its voyage the way it should have, and because Grace thought it was a good idea to grab the joystick rather than start opening fire on the zombies themselves. The moment she did that, everything went south real fast. Helicopter goes down, everyone's screaming now, and it hits the earth just as quickly as it took off. Grace checks the safety of everybody involved in the wonderful crash there. The pilot is taking a nap. He'll be back in a few, probably. And Grace in the back is quite injured, almost grievously, as she has a wound going on in the midsection area. But there's no time for that. Let's check on Leon. Let's see what he's up to. I find it awfully convenient that no matter what happens to Grace, it always happens right next to Leon, except Leon is in, 2 rooms over or a block away every single time. But we're going to let that go for now because Resident Evil. Anyway, so you get into a nice little mini game a la Resident Evil 4, where you're saving Ashley by sniping a whole bunch of cultists, only this time you're sniping zombies as Grace leads a mortally wounded Emily through a graveyard/courtyard area. You take a few cool crack shots, but other than that, it's really self-explanatory. They flood in, you gotta stop them, don't let the kids get eaten. Simple enough. Once done, you hop off the roof all Leon-like, and then you go to meet up with the other two. They give Leon another time to shine as he fights a horde of enemies using a various combination of weaponry like a hand axe, Alistair, ebony and ivory, and a few other things. But once he dispatches all the enemies, he notices the girls have already escaped through the bottom basement, to which he follows closely behind. In the meantime, getting a head start, Grace has decided that she's got to put the little girl Emily somewhere because the girl is back. She has not died from the elevator shaft incident or the Leon explodey head incident. So, since she's still alive, she's got to find a way to power the entire room. That way light can turn on and eventually destroy the girl because her weakness is light. You spend a good portion of time connecting wires and diodes and what have you. And in case you turn on the lights and they finally dispatch the girl for good, you watch her slowly crumble into just a mush mess. After a well-fought match against the girl and her lack of sunscreen, you make it back to Emily in time to find her completely and utterly just succumbing to her wounds. So Grace naturally has a breakdown, assuming it's all of her fault. Which, let's just pause here for a second. It is. It's absolutely 100% her fault. Had she not have just found a different way for her to read some sort of braille puzzle, she would have been just fine. That girl would have been in the only safe room in the entire mansion/game. But instead, she put her on a helicopter, she grabbed the joystick, she drove the helicopter into the ground, got her... You see where I'm going with this? Every single thing that happened to that little girl is because of Grace. So, Emily, that's on you, Grace. Sorry, not sorry. Anyway, I digress. Naturally, her demise ends up making her transform. She transforms into some twisted abomination that's at least 3 times the size she initially was. And Grace doesn't have the nerve to shoot or anything. But you know who does? Leon. Why? Because Leon, that's why. Shut up. Anyway, so Leon opens fire and quickly dispatches the monster. Grace is upset because it is her fault she got into this mess, and now she'll never forgive herself. Sad, sad times. Leon really has shit to do. And plus he's dying. As you can tell by the virus obviously coursing his veins and getting worse, and the fact that he's coughing out blood now. It's looking pretty dire for our hero, kids. Shackled with the guilt of everything she's done or what she's been responsible for, you know what you did. Grace now walks a lonely road, the only road she's ever known. And on that road, ironically enough, is Gideon, who just seems to appear anytime he needs to. And that man simply asks, "Why don't you come with us?" A massive door opens, revealing a man who looks strikingly like Wesker, only with silver hair and a cooler coat. He explains that she has a great purpose, and it's meant to take place in Raccoon City. Also, addendum to that, she is also the reason Raccoon City was destroyed. Interesting, I thought it was the T-virus. Well, no, apparently it was her. They'll explain later, though. So they offer her a hand, and they say, "Come with us." And she fucking goes with them. Someone want to explain that one? Why it was easier just to be like, "Oh, you're the bad guys? So yeah, I'm gonna go with you now after all this running from you and all these things trying to kill me?" The next scene, we get a good look at Sherry, who's obviously infected as well, and time is ticking for her, but she wears a glove, so it kind of covers up the fact that she's infected, so she'll be fine, at least for a little while longer. She gets on the line with Leon, who is now driving to Raccoon City in a stylish sports car. I thought the place was nuked personally, so I thought radiation would just kind of spread throughout the place, but I guess not. While driving there, Leon is informed by Sherry that she tried to look into Elpis, but they gave no information. Not only did they give no information, but the moment they said they were investigating it, the government told them to stop and stand down. So Leon is going dark, and Sherry is right alongside because she's the obligatory lady on the computer, so she's kind of got to follow him. That's the rules. But they're in this together till the end, they said. So, okay. Very well. Come on, big text. Don't disappoint me. Ah, there it is. That's such an Alan Wake thing to do. Good lord. Anyway, moving on. Not much of a synopsis is needed at this part because this is just a very giant, nostalgic tour through Raccoon City, or at least the ruins anyway. Sure, you get your boss fights like fighting a giant spider and things like that, but the main goal is to blow the main gate to get into central Raccoon City. And in order to do that, you have to collect 3 pieces of the detonator that are scattered to the wind, and you have to collect them all like you were playing Legends of the Hidden Temple. So, really, to be fairly honest, it was nice to look at, but for the most part, this is just Leon doing Leon things for the next, I don't know, an hour and a half. It might be sooner for a lot of you speedrunners out there. For people that are playing on Insanity, you probably took you 3 or 4 days to beat, but that's what you do. You search around. The only thing of note is that the BSAA were here, and you have old police officers in uniform zombies coming out of the ground now because they're ancient, zombified, mummified creatures now at this point. But that's it. There's nothing more to it that couldn't be solved with just shooting stuff. I swore I was just going to get a cutscene with Leon on a motorcycle, but no, instead I was treated to a full sequenced minigame in which you ride a motorcycle to shoot at little baddies. In this case, we have Gideon, who's also on his own motorcycle, sending mutated dogs after you. Now, it was at this point that I truly believed that they didn't have enough for Leon to do, so they kind of filled in the gap with a little bit of Grace action, but this was definitely Leon's game. This whole entire scene just told me that, and it's not like I hated it or anything. I'm actually quite used to it when it comes to Resident Evil, but the inclusion of this scene, if there could only be a skip button or anything like that after the fact, I would love that, because after you've done this once, that's enough. I think we've seen enough. This is the equivalent of watching Dante and Devil May Cry get into a fight 3 different times, and it's the same fight every single time. It's cool once, not so cool, more time consuming than anything after the fact. But shout out to Leon for shooting an Uzi while riding a motorcycle. You get to go against Gideon on the actual motorcycle. You have kind of a game of chicken, Mission Impossible style, and then Gideon ends up getting knocked off of a cliff. You move on, and it's time to go to RPD. It should be noted that while I do look at nostalgia as a weapon used against us more times than not to sell a product, I walked into RPD and my jaw dropped. It was just good to see RPD, even as ruined as it was, and even the fact that it was an obvious resemblance to the remake of Resident Evil 2 rather than the original PlayStation version. And then a thought occurred to me, if all the remakes are coming out using the RE engine, does that mean they're simply going to wipe the PlayStation ones and PlayStation 2 ones out of existence? Are there going to be any callbacks to that? I don't know. Who knows? If I sit there too long and dwell on the past that way, that's how you become nostalgic to the point in which you become a gatekeeper, which is something I don't appreciate. So I'm just going to let bygones be bygones and see where they go with this one and go from there. But I will tell you that enough acknowledgement towards the classics can go a long way, but that, I'm not the dev. Anyway, moving on. There's very little left of RPD as you're making your way through, so you go through about 5 or 6 rooms and it's kind of dead from there. However, once you make it to a certain point, you start to overhear a conversation between the gentleman that looks like Wesker and Grace. And what's explained to Grace is that Elpis is some sort of mind control weapon. And once activated, it'll bring the salvation of humankind because it'll knock everybody up to the next evolutionary step and the ladder, blah, 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 so on and so forth. You've heard it in every single Resident Evil. Now Grace knows what this is. The key thing is that it is explained to her that the United States government had everything to do with building this weapon, and in order to cover it up in their involvement, they had the city bombed. They claimed it was due to the fact that the zombie outbreak happened and they wanted to quarantine it, but in actuality it was to hide Elpis, essentially. It is then implied without actually stating it that the girls that look like Grace are all keys in trying to unlock Elpis, but because they were inferior in some sort of way, they could never be the ones to actually unlock Elpis. However, Grace can, and this man is convinced of that. In being told this information and looking at a monitor, it triggers a flashback for Grace in which she is back to the orphanage that she was adopted in. Surrounded by her are her other copies or clones or what have you. The only problem is, during this part of the storyline, they all seem to go bald and bananas. They're all killing everyone and they have glowing red eyes. So obviously they're definitely not a perfect copy of anything. Regardless, similar to the Mary Jane level in the Spider-Man video game for the PlayStation, you have to walk around as young Grace trying to avoid contacting these droned out dolls that are essentially killing everyone inside the building. Now, I know a lot of people have not too many good things to say about this phase in the storyline, but I will tell you, while it's easy to get through, narratively, it's just not something that needs to be in this part of the game, or at least controllable. This could have been just a CG movie and we could have called it a night. There's nothing to gain from this, nor is there anything to gain from dying from this. It just doesn't make sense to be able to play this part of her memories. But then again, I would say the same when you are with your mom in the beginning of the game. The remaining part of the flashback is simply you escaping out of the orphanage and into a lab, to which a scientist catches you, injects you with a virus, realizes that the experiment has failed, and requests that you get destroyed. That being said, it returns to the original conversation that you're having with Mr. Wesker clone here, and he explains that she must be the one to unlock the Elpis. That's the only way to do this. Leon appears just in time to save the day by firing a round at Mr. Wesker clone, to which he does a Wesker-like move and dodges it with the quickness. And then they get into kind of a fight. And by kind of a fight, I mean he summons Big Daddy himself, Mr. X, who lands through the ceiling, and you're simply going on a run away from him like a Crash Bandicoot level. Yes, Leon can be a badass generally, but sometimes you shouldn't go hand to hand with Mr. X. It's like, I don't know, trying to out-rocket the Nemesis. So anyway, you go hand to hand with Mr. X, and then eventually you're able to parry a lot of his attacks, deal the death blow via whatever weapon in your inventory. It doesn't really matter. At this point, your inventory should be stocked full of everything. And Leon wins the day. Leon has absolutely no idea how far behind he is from the Wesker clone and Grace, but he descends into the Ark itself as he's already defeated Mr. X. Once he gets in there, he actually sees humans for once. These guys are actually special forces though, and bullets are a weakness of every Resident Evil character. Everyone knows that. So once you get past those guys, whether it be by stealth or absolutely axing them in the dome, you'll find that the last and final human to come across is a commander, I guess, in quotes. He looks like Hunk, but I don't know if he's confirmed as Hunk, but you get to fist fight him, one-on-one. That's all well and good. After defeating him, you actually get to the front stage of Elpis itself, to which the Wesker clone explains that Elpis is activated via a password. However, word of caution, one wrong enter of the password means the actual Ark itself will self-destruct, and Grace is supposed to remember the password somehow. Grace has no idea what that password is. Before Grace can potentially ruin something with bad decisions, Leon shows up to save the day. Not to fight Mr. Wesker clone or anything like that, but to simply get Grace the hell out of there. To which he does quickly, and it knocks them both down into a basement. The virus flowing within Leon is now at critical mass as it simply sends him unconscious for just a moment. He does come to a few minutes later, and Grace is freaking the hell out, but then they get the idea that they have to find some way to escape the place, or at least find out how to stop Mr. Wesker clone. Now, in order to do that, Leon has to lift Grace into a shaft and allow her to walk through a lab and figure out how to get everything turned back on so they can make it back up there. And this area is filled with a lot of the staples. You get to see the liquor and things like that. You get to see an actual umbrella lab, and that's nice as well. Good nostalgia feels all around. However, one of the key things that happens is a room is unlocked that allows you to play discs. And the disc from Grace's mother's folder is actually one of the things she places inside the disc player, and she's able to see a video. Now, the first video seems to be some sort of interview with her mother as the person doing the interview to Spencer himself. Spencer seems to be filled with regret and doom and gloom. As it's obvious, these are his final years, and this is after everything that went down with Raccoon City and things like that. However, the video cuts short. Grace then moves to a video that literally just says her name, and we immediately go back to Leon. Now, the thing to note about Leon's adventures through this lab is that the virus kicks in at random times and just absolutely weakens him, so you have to navigate that while navigating the lab itself. It's difficult at times, a little annoying at times, but he manages. He ends up making it to the doorway of the Elpis login console command podium thing. He makes it there first, but he stops at the door as the virus has absolutely just kicked his ass. He collapses at the stairwell, and that's that. And we move right back to Grace, who has now clicked the video titled after her name. The video displays an interview once more explaining that Spencer had adopted a girl, a fairly plain girl named Grace. This was his way of repentance for everything he had done with all the monstrous experiments and things like that. The experiments would not and did not stop. However, if there was one good to come out of his life, it would be Grace. And so she was his only hope. That being said, watching it gave her a flash of inspiration when it came to the password, obviously, but was quickly interrupted when she noticed Leon on the camera actually dying. So, better get on that. Grace and Leon then enter the console room one more time, where Big Baddie is still just standing there waiting for someone to enter in the damn password. Grace explains she will enter the password on one condition, that Leon's life is spared. No matter what happens, no shenanigans, and don't kill her boy. To which Wesker agrees. He says, okay. Now, after that happens, she goes up to the console and there's a fork in the road from this point. You have a choice to make. You can either do a password that destroys everything, or you can have a password that unlocks Elpis. Now, me, because Leon made me promise to end this when I got a chance, and the fact that it made the most logical sense in any scenario, I chose to destroy it. And the moment I did, everything collapsed on itself. The big boss was upset and scared, wondering what's going on, and Leon got me the hell out of there and stayed behind where he could fight the final boss in Valhalla or whatever. Well, what ended up happening was something that I did not expect as well. They actually shot and killed Leon. This was a move that I never expected to happen, and I was actually happy it did. Not only because I wanted him to be a retired character, but I wanted them to do something that was different. I wanted to see something that was different, and this by far was the most different move they could have chosen. After he's shot and killed, the final boss kind of watches you angrily and screams, "Why God?" as the rest of the place explodes and you find an escape, making your way out of the Ark itself. The Elpis is destroyed, you win the day. You spend your last minutes before the credits roll saying, "I'm sorry, Leon, I'm sorry I couldn't save you," and I'm sure she's racked with guilt on that, on top of killing everybody else she knows and loves anytime she's around them. Then the credits roll. But here's the thing, and here's what bothered me greatly. Once you reach the end of the credits, a question appears where it asks you if you'd like to go right back to the decision again and make a different one. I've never seen that before. Now, bear in mind, a lot of games will actually allow you to save before a big decision's made, and then if you want to reload your game to see what an alternate ending is, fine. It's not exactly the most proper way to do it, but it does happen. But this question after the credits seemingly made it feel as if they were telling you, hey, it's probably not the best decision. You want to redo that? You want to go back? You want to do that again? And I wondered why, so I chose yes. And I went back, and instead I unlocked Elpis. Come to find out, Elpis was the antiviral for every virus Spencer had ever made. Once you get it injected in you, that's it. So once Elpis is unlocked, the Wesker clone grabs a antiviral. He had no idea that it was an antiviral and injects himself in the neck with it. Moments later, his powers actually leave his body. He's trying to figure out and understand why, and that's when Gideon appears to explain that having an antiviral is far more powerful than any sort of virus that Spencer could have made, because the moment damage is done, you will be the only person on the planet that has a way to end it, giving you the power of a king, probably more than any sort of tyrant virus or nemesis or anything like that. He then lops the head off of the Albert Wesker clone and calls it a night with him. Grace decides it'd be a smarter idea to simply go and inject an antiviral into Leon. As soon as she does, the man rises as if he has taken a sensu bean, and now begins the final part of the game, where I believed it would be Grace as the final character in the last part of the game. No, it is actually Leon, and Leon faces off against Gideon himself. Now, it's pretty clean cut in the beginning, where Gideon is just, shooting lightning at people because that's a power he has now all of a sudden. And then once you actually knock his health down enough, he transforms into his true form. Much like every other Resident Evil villain, they have a giant tentacled octopus form, and that's what you fight. Once you defeat it, the day is saved, you and Grace escape, and life is good. You get mentioned from one of these soldiers that actually come in to do the evac for you two, that Commander Redfield has a message for you. So they name dropped Chris Redfield. I don't know if he's going to be in any DLC, but they just say he's in the game. So, okay. Grace still seems to be upset and lets Leon know that she is still just absolutely distraught over the fact that Emily died during this whole interaction. To which Leon says out of nowhere she might be alive and we might still have a way to save her. I have no idea how that is, but when the cutscene shows the body that was Emily after being shot and killed, it's a cocoon of some sort. It was a form she turned into when she died, but now it looks like her body's encased in some sort of cocoon that was the monster. I don't understand how that works, and maybe someone in the comments can help me out with that one. But in any case, I digress. By the end of the credits, you learn that Grace has actually adopted Emily, and now they live together. Leon is out doing Leon things, explaining he's got other things to get into and other sequels to jump into. And the day is saved, and the game is through. When focusing on the story and the fact that it's a Resident Evil game, I'm not asking for much. And over the years, I've seen just ludicrous ideas, and on paper they don't even sound sane. However, when they're applied in Resident Evil, no one's surprised, no one bats an eye. Makes sense. However, I will tell you this, the way the story is conveyed is the part that bothers me about this game. You have action and horror side by side, and not only side by side, but they work in tandem with each other and piggyback off of each other in the same area. This isn't one character who's in Tallahassee and another character who's in Utah. These characters are relatively in the same areas. And I'm led to believe that the entire storyline will go and alter itself in some way based on the characters portrayed. So we have Leon, who is everyone's fan favorite, and they've obviously made his entire gameplay in the format of Resident Evil 4. Fine, I get it, it makes sense. That's what sells. Leon sells, he's the champ, I got it. You throw a new character in like Grace and you apply the 7 and Village formula to her gameplay. Now you do that because she's not battle ready and hardened with 18 weapons on a backpack. I get that. I understand why you would choose that style. But here's the problem. When you merge two styles like that, I call it the steak sandwich, ice cream sandwich problem. Steak sandwiches sound good. Ice cream sandwiches sound good. Ice cream steak sandwiches do not sound good. It's two of your favorite things, sure. But if they both go on the same sandwich and you take a bite, it's going to be awful. Either one's going to overpower the other, or they're simply just not going to be good together. And while I know there are certain people out there that enjoy Leon and his storyline, where he's simply just trying to find a way to get the virus out of his system, you also have to think about the fact that you're also dealing with another girl who is being led to believe a certain thing about her lineage or about her destiny. Come to find out, none of it's true. She's a walking red herring. So that part of the storyline is actually pretty amazing. I like that idea. However, when you use it in conjunction with Leon Kennedy and his ability to backflip motorcycles into missiles, you're going to have a bit of a problem. The way you're telling the story is weird. It's almost like being at a campfire listening to a creepy story, and then the guy next to the guy telling a creepy story says, "Hey, I have a story about my wedding. Would you like to hear it?" These are two different tones and two different ways to convey this, whatever they're trying to convey. And I feel like Resident Evil Requiem is just that. I believe we are playing two games that are so uncomfortably close to each other that you're literally just jumping over. And it's not a gradual or fluid jump into the next genre. It is quite possibly the most stilted. I mean, at one point in the story, Leon literally breaks into the plot and you jump over to control him right after your character crashes a helicopter right next to him. Like, it just jumps off one rail and onto another. And I think if you're going to tell a story, you have to make sure the tones have some sort of setting and match. This is why no one liked Resident Evil 6. Not at all. Everyone had everything to complain about it, but I will tell you this, all the characters' stories all meshed together. They were terrible stories, but they did mesh together. Here we have a situation where you're learning about Grace. She's a new face into the Resident Evil game, and you're getting just enough out of her only for that entire atmosphere, mood, and vibe to just be deleted the moment Leon shows up and goes, "Let's go, buddy. You should take a shower," and starts doing tricks with his guns. Leon Kennedy is the Dante of Resident Evil. He's doing absurd things and saying absurd things, all because he's Billy Badass. I get that. But there has to be some way to rein him in or have other people or characters catch up. Because the story itself, and, you know, looking through it step by step, we went through it already. Looking at it was not a situation where I said that was a dumb story idea. There are a lot of people out there that say this game retconned a number of different things. I hate to break it to you, but Resident Evil retcons all the time, so this should not be surprising, and this should not deter you at all. Now, it'd be different if it was a Silent Hill game or something like that, and this came out and it was completely different. I understand what the big fuss is, but with Resident Evil, they came on the outset and just said, hey, we're going to do this instead. And they did. They absolutely changed whatever they wanted, and that was it. Hell, they can't even agree on a time when they actually shot the nukes into Raccoon City. It keeps jumping around between 3 or 4 different kind of days, so, yeah. In any case, the storyline itself is not the issue. It's the way it's conveyed. It's the way it's told. And right now, because they want to have their cake and eat it too, and have a steak with their cake and eat that too, and things like that, their tones are now meshed and intertwined with each other so bad that the storylines don't really cohesively get told correctly. And it's just a story on one side and Leon with kind of a story on the other. I will mention, though, Gideon is an amazing villain. I like him because he is very, very black and white. He shows up in nearly every scene out of nowhere, kind of like a slasher film, and he delivers lines very, very intelligently and calculated. However, he's still a monster, and I appreciate that. I like seeing him on the screen. Xeno is useless. Not even so much as the fact that they took away his powers or anything like that. I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned about is they didn't do much diving into him at all. He just kind of copied the mannerisms of Albert Wesker, and they just said that's good. Let's move on from there. I have nothing to say about him because he had nothing to say about himself. So he was a bit of a disappointment. Leon, is Leon. He's Leon Kennedy. He's gonna do what he does. And nothing about his MO has changed in the last 20 years, and it shouldn't, because he is a tried and true character from the originals. Grace is one of those characters where I think if she's put in a few different other situations, rather than just a situation where she's supposed to feel extreme guilt throughout the entirety of the game itself, I might actually like her, but right now I don't have much to go off of her. All I know is that she's anxious as all hell, and she feels terrible for what she's done, and she always seems to find a way to blame herself for everything. And yes, a lot of people would do that if they went through what she went through, but in order for me to get a spectrum of the character, in order for me to understand the character, I need you to show me something, and she has not showed me anything. There's no reason for me to believe that she should be Game of the Year material with her performance or anything like that. There just isn't. I have nothing to go on. I wanted to do kind of a checklist, a top to bottom on the plot line itself, and I think if I would give it a score out of 1 to 10 when it came to a storyline, I'd give it a solid 5. It's right down the middle. It's exactly what every other Resident Evil is for the most part, and it doesn't really add anything new to the franchise at all. If anything, it may take some stuff away, but it's more technical than that. Bottom line, Resident Evil Requiem didn't do anything new to the storylines and is no different than Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6, except for the boulder punching. Outside of that, I'm looking at the same kind of Resident Evil as any other Resident Evil that I've seen in the past. And in the end, my biggest complaint is the fact that Grace had a plotline that turns out to be false. And Leon had a plotline that implied that he was dying. Both of these instances did not come to pass. I'm not saying I wish Leon would die, and I'm not saying that I wish Grace had superpowers. What I am saying is both characters had the same exact idea and premise, and the idea was that we were going to lead with one story, and by the end of the game, you actually got the opposite effect. And that's it. Not to mention there were about 5 characters in this game. Compared to a lot of the other Resident Evils that had trillions of characters everywhere, it was like 5 or 6, and one of them's an Albert Wesker clone. Which I don't know if they're trying to imply that because you see him in this game, there's obviously a factory somewhere shooting them out. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I don't know. In any case, I went over the story. I've given you my opinion on the story itself. Next video, I'm going to get into the gameplay and all that other goodness, and we'll see what else we can get out of it. But as for the story, you've seen one, you've seen them all. It's Resident Evil. I don't know what I expected. Probably nothing, if we're being honest. But if you're expecting anything other than exactly what you saw, just a display of action moves, missiles, zombies, and some obligatory fan service, if you're expecting anything else other than that, you need to be playing a different game. Or maybe you think you're playing a different game already. I don't know. Anyway, All right, guys, I'm getting the hell out of Dodge. I think I've spent too much time on this video as is. We'll talk more later, but if you got something in the comments you want to discuss, I'm here for it. Shout out to everybody on my Patreon. You have my love and adoration, all my new subscribers, all that good stuff. It's good to be back playing new games, but whew, if I don't get something new, I'm going to punch a boulder myself.